Everyone knows Guantanamo Bay, but America's darkest prisons were the ones it swore didn't exist. Scattered across the globe, hidden from public view, were black sites, covert prisons designed to erase America's most secret operations. Their locations were classified, and the horrors inside were worse than you think. But just how far would the CIA go to keep its secrets? On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're uncovering the locations of the CIA's infamous black sites. The attack on the World Trade Center rocked America, thrusting it and the world into an era of paranoia and guerrilla terrorism. America's intelligence agencies were under immense pressure to find the people responsible and bring them to justice. But U.S. laws and international treaties limited what they could do to prisoners. So the CIA found a workaround: build secret prisons overseas with help from foreign governments, where American laws didn't apply. Kidnapping suspects from their own country to be taken for interrogation at these tertiary countries became known by the euphemism extraordinary rendition. This was the birth of the CIA black site, at least 20 of them spanning several countries. In total, 119 to 136 people were imprisoned in these sinister facilities. At least 39 were subjected to the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, and 26 were detained on faulty information. The whole extraordinary rendition scheme was performed with the collaboration of at least 54 countries. These sites were so secretive that even some high-profile members of the U.S. government were deceived about their existence. Internal CIA memos advised not telling the Secretary of State Colin Powell about the black sites, fearing that he would, quote, blow his stack if he were to be briefed on what's been going on. The first foreign CIA black site was an experimental detention center in Thailand, hosted by Udorn Royal Thai Air Force Base. It was codenamed Detention Site Green, but it had the nickname Cat's Eye. It's speculated that there may have been a second black site nearby, hidden within Don Muang Royal Thai Air Force Base. In 2002, Detention Site Green was used to interrogate Abu Zubaydah, a suspected 9/11 operative who became the first war on terror detainee to be tortured. Though the site was known to some senior Thai officials, it wasn't universally supported. Several politicians allegedly tried to get the base shut down, fearing the inevitable blowback that would follow if the site and its purpose was ever exposed. The Middle East itself naturally also has several prominent black sites. In Afghanistan, there have been considerable suspicions of black sites in the city of Jalalabad and Asadabad, but these aren't nearly as infamous as Abu Ghraib. The Iraqi prison complex became synonymous with torture and abuse after shocking photos of prisoner mistreatment were made public. There have also been reports of black sites at Camp Bucca and Camp Cropper, also in Iraq. The worst black site in the Middle East was something else entirely. More on that later. Far out in the Indian Ocean, the US and UK secretly collaborated to build a black site on the US naval base at Diego Garcia, a remote island territory few people even know exists. Both governments denied the allegations for years, but in 2015, former Secretary of State Colin Powell's Chief of Staff, Lawrence Wilkerson, ended the debate, admitting the base had been used by the CIA for nefarious activities. And back in 2008, British Foreign Secretary David Miliband apologized for earlier evasion around the Diego Garcia black site. After 9/11, when the extraordinary rendition plan began to heat up, the CIA struck a $15 million deal with Polish intelligence. The money was literally delivered in large cardboard boxes stuffed with cash, in exchange for permission to use Polish facilities. The CIA then poured additional funds into converting a site into a secret prison codenamed Quartz. However, compared to some of the other black sites, Quartz almost seemed tame. Detainees could even earn rewards for good behavior, like a private room with a stationary bike or a treadmill. Poland later admitted that at least 2 prisoners were held and tortured there. But torture was standard practice across the program, so that hardly made Quartz unique. Though the black site in Poland was actually far from the only one in Europe that the CIA operated, particularly in former Soviet satellite states, who were perhaps eager to improve their relationship with US intelligence. These include Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bulgaria, Czechia, Georgia, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Lithuania, and Romania. Despite early denials from the Romanian government that their soil was ever used to detain suspects, evidence later suggested otherwise. The Swiss intelligence service reportedly intercepted a communication suggesting that more than 20 foreign prisoners were being held at an airbase near the city of Constanta on the Black Sea. Similar bases are also likely to be situated in Ukraine, Kosovo, Macedonia, and Bulgaria. In the last several years, Lithuania actually put up the building that was previously a CIA black site for auction. Meanwhile, in Bosnia, the running theory was that a black site would likely be situated at Camp Eagle. The same is true of the ominously named Camp Bond Steel in Kosovo, which is not open to inspections by the Committee for the Prevention of Torture. This is despite a provision that they are allowed to inspect every place of detention of one of their member states. One human rights campaigner who was able to visit the detention center at Camp Bondsteel referred to it as a smaller version of Guantanamo, which, as we'll soon find out, is not a great sign for its attitude toward human rights. There are also several prominent CIA black sites located in Africa. There have been reports of brutal interrogation tactics used in black sites based in both Egypt and Morocco. In Morocco, the most likely black site was the Timara Interrogation Center, where high-profile detainees like Ramzi bin al-Shibh and Binyam Mohammed claimed that they and many others were brutally tortured. The most likely theory is that this facility is Moroccan-run but CIA-financed, allowing it to act as a proxy detention center. Similar accusations have been made about Libya, as well as the Camp Lominiere in Djibouti, and all of these locations were ideal for the CIA, remote from the US, yet close enough to the Middle East to make transferring kidnapped suspects fast and discreet. Some CIA black sites aren't even landlocked locations in foreign countries. They are always moving, prison ships and rendition aircraft. The US warship USS Bataan has a temporary prison that's believed to have been a stopgap before committing prisoners to more traditional black sites. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as floating prisons for the CIA goes. The Guardian has also earmarked numerous vessels as black site ships, including the USS Peleliu, the USS Ashland, USNS Charlton, and USNS Doll. And that is not even counting the rendition planes, the covert aircraft used to kidnap and transport detainees between sites. These flights were crucial to the CIA's network, moving prisoners across continents under total secrecy. Some of the most infamous aircraft included N313P, a Boeing 737, N379P, a Gulfstream 5, and N85VM, a Gulfstream 4. Then, of course, there is the infamous Guantanamo Bay. Constructed in southeastern Cuba, the detention center is part of a wider U.S. Navy base in the area. After 2002, it began receiving suspected members of al-Qaeda as well as members of the Taliban. Like all of these secret prisons, the Bush administration contended that typical laws and restrictions on treatment of prisoners didn't apply here. The people they were detaining were neither civilians nor soldiers, just, quote, unlawful enemy combatants. This, in the United States' view, put them outside of the protections of the Geneva Convention. A lot of people involved in international human rights organizations did not agree with the United States government on this matter. Technically, Gitmo isn't actually a CIA black site, just a military prison that shares a CIA black site penchant for extreme methods. In truth, we only actually know about a fraction of the extent to which the CIA and American soldiers committed tortures against their detainees in black sites across the globe. Much of what we know comes from the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee's report on torture, released in December 2014. The public version ran over 600 pages, but that was just a fraction. The full report is around 6,000 pages long and remains classified. That's right, the government only released about 10% of what it actually found. Still, even the compromised version of the report confirmed that over a dozen black sites were operating globally. Each one played host to atrocities that feel eerily similar to the work of groups like the Gestapo and the East German Stasi. Details of the report show that it wasn't just soldiers and CIA agents manning these black sites. Doctors and lawyers also played a disturbing role in the proceedings. Doctors would assess detainees to establish that they were medically fit to be tortured, as well as treating the victims after the brutality. Dead prisoners weren't as useful to the CIA as live ones. They also sometimes took a much more active role in the black site crimes, personally assisting in torturing prisoners or using their medical knowledge to help the staff devise new and more effective methods. Lawyers from both the U.S. Justice Department and the CIA helped grease the gears of the torture machine. They assessed each torture method in advance, ensuring it fit under the newly expanded definition of enhanced interrogation. The CIA also made sure that everyone involved was granted legal immunity for their actions, no matter how brutal those actions turned out to be. All these arrangements allowed black sites to keep on moving like self-contained infrastructures of abuse and pain. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, one of the most infamous detainees moved between CIA black sites, endured some of the harshest treatment on record. He was waterboarded, kept naked, deprived of sleep for up to 180 hours, verbally and physically assaulted, forced into stress positions, and walling, the act of shoving someone against a wall to intimidate them. All of these were deemed completely above board as long as there was a physician supervising. The same goes for tortures that had a menacingly sexual undertone, like rectal infusion. In this torture, used when a detainee went on hunger strike, the food would be pureed and forcibly inserted into their rectum, an experience that could be as humiliating as it was painful for the people subjected to it. There were sexual elements to a lot of the punishments doled out at black sites, given that the staff were fully clothed and the detainees were often forced to be completely naked at all hours of the day. And the psychological torture could sometimes even supersede what was going on physically. At the George Bush Center for Intelligence in Langley, Virginia, the CIA's Counterterrorism Center went even further, declaring that threatening a detainee's family to extract information was perfectly legal as long as those threats were considered conditional. Some have argued that the very design of the black site, isolated, secret, and built to extract intelligence without oversight, made abuse almost inevitable. In 2004, Robert Lifton referred to this in the context of atrocity-producing situations, which leads us neatly to what we think is the most disturbing black site that came out of the War on Terror, a black site near Kabul, Afghanistan, codenamed alternatingly Salt Pit and Cobalt. But those names weren't known to its detainees, who simply knew it as the Dark Prison. This dark, isolated prison deep in the Afghani desert was a hell on earth for anyone trapped there. 20 prison cells in total, each one narrow with concrete walls and floor and no bed. So every moment of being in there would produce maximum discomfort. In 16 of the cells, there were metal rings bolted onto the walls, where the prisoners were then chained up like dogs. The other 4 cells designed specifically for sleep deprivation. Prisoners were hanged by their wrists from metal bars bolted onto the ceiling and forced to dangle for hours on end. In terms of amenities, if you were in one of the 16 cells, you were forced to do your business in a bucket and then sit there with the smell. If you were hanging from the overhead bar, you would be forced to wear a diaper if you were lucky. And if you were unlucky, a crude approximation of a diaper made out of duct tape by resident soldiers. Aside from the duct tape diaper, you would be kept naked at all times, locked in total darkness, where the freezing walls and floor seemed to bite at your skin. And even if you weren't confined to one of the sleep deprivation cells, rest was impossible. Loud music blasted through the facility day and night. One prisoner named Gul Rahman was found frozen to death in his cell in November of 2002, less than 70 days after the facility was opened. Not long before his death, he was subjected to 48 hours of sleep deprivation, was beaten, deprived of food and water, and otherwise tormented. When his body was discovered in his cell, he was only wearing a diaper and socks. By all accounts, the black site's manager, Matthew Zerbel, was as inexperienced as he was sadistic. The facility was filled to prisoner capacity within a month, and the constant loud music and darkness was Zerbel's own personal touch. He had all of the lights in the cells rigged to a single light switch, so he had total control. Most of the torture was carried out under the supervision of CIA officer Mark Zerbel, working alongside James Mitchell and Bruce Jensen, American psychologists who designed the agency's so-called enhanced interrogation program. Any prisoner complaints about the conditions, including human rights abuse, was written off as an Al-Qaeda resistance technique. This was an odd way to frame it, given that more than just members of Al-Qaeda would attempt to resist being actively tortured. These attitudes, which underpinned how prisoners were treated across all of these black sites, were the groundwork for Rahman's death. The man's failing health was instead seen as a sign that his resistance was breaking down. Agents believed that this would lead to success in his interrogations, rather than him just perishing from the cold in his uninsulated cell. He was buried in an unmarked grave not long after that. The people behind Cobalt thought Guantanamo Bay was a compromise, where the whims of the prisoners ran the show. Everything about Cobalt, from the size and design of its cells to the conditions of cold darkness and perpetual noise, were designed to demoralize and break anyone trapped there from the ground up. It is, in a way, the dark, platonic ideal of the CIA black site post 9/11, and it was only closed in 2021, when the U.S. Army withdrew from Afghanistan and the Taliban retook control. As the troops left, large parts of the base were destroyed to keep them from falling into enemy hands. But its dark legacy, and that of every CIA black site, will live on. especially in the minds of those who endured the torture and abuse within them. We've exposed where the agency hides its secret prisons, but that is only part of the story. Watch 10 craziest CIA covert operations to see the missions they never wanted the world to know about, or click on this video instead.